So one thing that came up, I think that's important to clarify in the discussion as we move forward generally, it's sort of related to the idea of privilege of, white people saying, but I have, but I'm poor, but I've suffered, but I, et cetera, et cetera. And while that's true, the dots are not connecting as clearly as they were in my mind earlier, but we need to differentiate between talking about things that are systematic and things that are systemic. So something that's systematic is a conscious strategy that's deployed throughout a system to achieve an end. Something that's systemic is something that has invaded the system, even unconsciously, and is there without being seen. And while we do indeed sometimes experience, and there is systematic racism, a lot of what we're talking about is systemic racism. It's that unseen, unconscientized, unrecognized structure that's underneath. It's not anything that any one individual has done or not done to be racist. It's living in that space. It's using those structures, or not even using them, just living them, right? When I go out of the house in the morning and I pull away from the curb, I do not have to worry about whether I'm going to encounter the Mesquite Police Department that day. And if I do come in contact with the Mesquite Police Department, I never have to worry about whether I'm going to be tased or arrested.
Unless there's a murderous priest with a collar and glasses running around that's terrorizing the Mesquite community.
That is not anything that I've done, but it is privilege in which I live. It's systemic, right? It's not systematic for me, it's systemic. And I'm benefiting from that because I can move freely without fear through my day.
Mm-hmm. Jeffrey, that right there is how one of my good college friends and how I got the chance to actually be a helpmate, a teacher to one of my white college friends who lived in Highland Park. She'd gone to Highland Park High School. I went to Jesuit. We found out we were going to Loyola together, and Loyola hosted this Dallas a welcome party for all the students that were coming to Loyola from Dallas. They held it in Dallas, that kind of thing. We met there. We started hanging out. She's a cool girl. Her family is pretty cool. Dad is kind of crazy, but hey, he's a good man. When I was leaving her house one night, after hanging out with her and her family, that kind of thing, we had dinner together. And I pulled away from his house. I noticed a cop car that was kind of on the opposite side of the street that was parked. I pulled off. The cop car pulled behind me. No lights or anything. I'm looking at my rearview mirror, sweating bullets. Like, oh my God, I know what this is going to be, because I'm a black man in Highland Park after sundown, and yeah, there's a whole lot of this. There's a whole lot about this that can go wrong. So I call my friend up on the phone. Hey, I just want to have you on the phone because there's a cop following me as I'm leaving your house. She said, "Oh, this shouldn't be a problem." Blah blah blah. I was like, "No, seriously, there is a cop following me. I'm in Highland Park. I had to break it down all the way down for her. I am scared. I'm holding you on the phone until I get on 75 to head home." No less than maybe 30 seconds after I completely told her how I felt, lights came on, right? And so the cop came up and he was like, "Well, where are you going, son?" I'm like, "Well, sir, you saw me come from the house that I did. That's my friend's house. That's the Mahoney's house. You saw where I was going from, and I'm trying to get home." "Well, why are you out here so late?" "I had dinner with my friends." He started asking me all kinds of superfluous questions. Had him ask me for my idea. What's that?
Is she
While she's on
still?
the phone. Yeah. She's still on the phone. He's asking me all these superfluous questions. I'm still sweating. Heather, you know I can sweat like I sweat at the drop of a dime.
You don't have a
right?
problem.
Right. And so he's like, well, do you know why I pulled you over? I was like, no, sir. Because my mom always told me, my grandmother always told me, yes, sir, no, sir, to anyone wearing a badge, period. He said, well, your tail light is out. So I just want to stop you and let you know about that. But you get on home, son. I'm like, okay, well, first of all, I didn't tell him this. I was like, okay, thank you. He let me go. And I pulled back around to my friend's house and went right back to her house. The cop followed me. But the cop followed me back to her house, too. And so as she's coming out, as her dad is coming out, comes to find out her dad actually knows the cop. And her dad got in the cop's face. It was like, why are you harassing this boy? Or why are you harassing this young man? He never did call me boy or anything like that. But
Did he call you son?
What?
He didn't call you son?
Son.
The cop called me son. Yeah.
No. Mahoney.
Oh. Well, after that, he called me one of his sons.
Oh, nice.
But not in the derogatory way, right?
Right. But long story short, it's not until some people actually see it face to face until they can be part of the story, and to really comprehend how all of this works, how it affects people, and how they play a part in it.
And
that's one of the reasons. Oh, wait.
No, you go. Keep finished.
I was just going to say one of the community organizers' best tool in the advocacy work is their story.
Mm-hmm.
When we own our story, when we're able to articulate it and tell it to others and draw an emotional response from them, then that other person who's hearing the story finds their teeth in the game, and they're like, okay, let me walk alongside you, learn some things in the process, and let's figure the thing out together.
Yeah. And I think two things regarding that story is that, one, your friend's dad, that is a maybe an extreme example, but that is the way to use your white privilege, because that's the whole thing. Our white privilege is not going away, not anytime soon, at least. And so we have to use it to make the change that needs to be made. And that's one way that you can do that. I know. So my best friend is Black, and he got his driver's license before me. And so when we would go, he would drive and we would go to games or whatever. And, when the cops come by, he tenses up,
Mm-hmm.
which is fair because he knows how it goes down. And so, for white people, you have to understand how to be able to use that, because if you want to make change, because that's the way that it's got to happen. And then that's the other thing, my dad's a police officer, actually, and he was teaching a class. So after Sandra Bland, they implemented a mandatory class for all police officers, at least in the DFW area. I'm not sure where else to go to, that talked about how to deal with people with mental health issues, specifically people of color with mental health issues and Black people with mental health issues, because there was a disparity between how cops were dealing with white men and white women with mental health and how they were dealing with Black men and Black women with mental health issues. And so I was in this class, and my dad brought up, and I'd already known this, but it was just crazy to hear him say to a room of cops, I never had to teach my daughters that when a cop pulls them over when they start driving, to put their hands on the dash and to make sure their hands are always seen, and yes sir, yes ma'am. And he was like, I taught them to be respectful, but I never had to teach them those things because I knew that really they were going to be safe no matter what they did. And I think that is another huge, with police brutality, that's a way that I think white people are coming to realize how deep their white privilege runs, that even in interactions like that, people get pulled over for speeding every day, but they never really thought about how it's different for them being pulled over to speed rather than a black man or a black woman being pulled over for speeding, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah, like I put in the private chat, like while we were discussing, it's a
Mhm.
privilege. It's a privilege to be able to debate the value of somebody else's life. It's a
Absolutely.
privilege to say all lives matter when we see in plain view that African Americans are have that African Americans suffer disproportionately on a grand scale, a lot of different disparities compared to other minorities as well as white counterparts, as well as the dominant culture, right? I mean, it I actually had someone, you know, I was walking around the Capitol and I had my Black Lives Matter T-shirt on. It just says Black Lives Matter in font that's about this size. You don't have to be far away to actually see it, but you don't have to be like super far, or you don't have to be super close to see it. So as I'm walking, this one guy, all lives matter. As I'm walking by, I hadn't said a word to this guy, and he just comes out of the blue and says all lives. I was like, guy, you know that's privilege right there. And he started to go off the rails. I just went on. I put my earbuds in and went on by my way. I just let him go off the hook. But that's the kind of vitriol that we constantly, you know, and it happens in the Hispanic community. It happens to women. It happens to gays. It happens to disabled persons. That's the reason I said everybody's suffering from something, right?
Mhm.
Because even the rich, Zan Holmes used to always say, there's some people so poor that all they have is money.
Mhm.
And with that money, with that power, with whatever they have, there's certain problems that come along with it, right? And especially if somebody else wants what you have, or if your money is based on the stock market and some nut in some like spoiled orange in the White House is causing markets to fluctuate. Sorry, you know, they might be suffering from the delusion that this country is going to completely unravel because of the civil unrest that's happening, all because Black Lives Matter. You know,
Yeah.
there's privilege wrapped up in there. There's suffering packed up in there. How do we deal with our own crap?
Yes.
That should be the message of the day. And I'm sorry to be
Mhm.
so candid, but yeah,
Well, and
Yeah,
another
well,
thing oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, especially from the perspective of being a student, is that, you know, another form of white privilege is that, um, especially being in a predominantly Black and Hispanic area, is that we take aspects of Black culture and we, you know, we have them in our day-to-day lives. We're listening to hip hop music and
Oh,
we are
cultural
trying to do
appropriation. Yeah, we got to talk
exactly
about that
cultural
another time.
right, exactly. You know, we're having this cultural appropriation um and so we want to use Black culture in that way, but then we don't want to defend it when we don't want to defend someone when they see overt or covert racism, and we don't want to get into these conversations because they're political and I'm not political, and you know, and that's again another form of privilege is you know, white people are getting to say, I'm just not going to talk about it. I don't like to be political. How is dealing with people dying, dealing like people's lives and the value of their lives? How is that political?
Mhm.
Since
Street.
when is that political, you know?
But then again, that's the way that we use our privilege. Let's
Hmm.
say, because for example, we may be dealing with a person that is been bullied or even killed because they're transgender, and if I don't do anything, that is something that is a privilege that I don't have to deal with that issue because I'm not part of that community, or I'm not transgender. But then again, it's a lie. It's a person live at stake, and it's going to be irresponsible for me not to do anything. The same thing that if I'm seeing a person being disrespected because she's black or because he's black, regardless of my privilege of not being the one directly affected by it, I need to do something. Because um, if I'm not, if I only put the I don't see it glasses and just walk away, I'm being also a passive aggressor because I'm not helping. And that's just my point of view. Because I mean, if I see the injustice and I don't do anything about it, I'm also being a passive aggressor. And that's why it's so important to have this kind of discussions, because we're involving not people only on my age. We're involving you guys. You guys. What we always say, hey, the kids and the teenagers. I mean, they're our future. Yeah, but what kind of future are we paving for them? What are we really talking about our differences and how to come to terms, how to build or paving a better society, or are we just saying it doesn't affect us, let's just keep on walking?
John, were you going to say something?
No, I'm
Oh, okay.
nothing
Um,
specific.
We were talking this morning about how even the concept of social distancing is an expression of white privilege.
Child.
Something deep in here. Okay. All right. Let's.
So, so I'm working, and it's so hard. I'm learning how hard it is every day, because in this short amount of time, we have been already so conditioned to say social distancing, and I'm trying to switch my language to physical distancing, and it's hard. I catch myself all the time. But one of my colleagues said, well, how is that an expression of white privilege? Because for me, as a white person, to be the object of social distancing isn't a stigma. People can socially distance themselves from me, and it's not a reflection of who I am as a person or who I am racially. But people who are on the margins, who have been subject to systematic and systemic social distancing, right? This is just another way of overlaying a system that disadvantages them or affects them disproportionately or affects me disproportionately. Does that make sense?
If we
Absolutely.
can take that further, further, Jeffrey.
Christian, you always take it further.
Run.
maybe,
Good.
maybe when I start preaching on a regular basis, or I'll do a sermon series called "Can I Push It Further?" Like Howard John Wesley is doing up here at Willow Avenue Baptist Church. No, at Alfred Street Baptist Church. If you ever get a chance, this is a sidetrack plug. If you ever get the opportunity to look into Alfred Street Baptist Church in Alexandria, Virginia, Howard John Wesley Jr. or Howard John Wesley is the senior pastor. Remarkable. He's one of my go-tos on Sunday and even sometimes during the week. So just want to put that out there. He's done a sermon series this entire COVID-19 pandemic where can I push it further? So maybe I'll do that too. But anyway, long story short, social distancing, or what we've come to know as social distancing, is a privilege for some and a burden for others because of those systems that have been developed, where Black folks and Hispanic folks and all kinds of minorities, poor white folks too, have been herded into neighborhoods and apartment buildings and stuff like that where they cannot social distance. And even in households of disenfranchised persons, their economic status as a family may not allow them to be able to go into all corners of the house and stay there and avoid contact with each other. Because sometimes you have entire families living together, and that goes back to the conversation that we were having earlier. When someone says all lives matter, okay, I'm glad you agree. Now let's help us to understand why there is a conversation going on that says Black Lives Matter, and by extension of that, what about the brown lives that are separated at the border and put in cages, right? What about the Asian families? What about the Asian lives that were used as railroad constructors back in the day when the West was being civilized, right? So we have to understand. It goes back to that understanding that everybody's suffering from something. Everybody's suffering from the same system that is based in whiteness, that is based in white superiority, that is an extension of colonization, and so is what is it, capitalism. We're all suffering from something. How can we collectively push the knee off of our necks, right? And right the wrongs of our society, and craft that beloved community that Martin Luther King talks about. Because this is the watershed moment. Go ahead.
Breathe with the spirit of life that was given to us. That is literally breath. We can't do that, you know. John, you look like you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just Christian said something that brought something to my mind. I was one of those when the Black Lives Matter movements first started. And I go to my wife and I said, well, I think all lives matter. And that was just my first initial reaction. And what I have learned is that sometimes you've got to know when to say, but wait, I was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
That isn't the point. And you just have to think about that sometimes. And, be willing to learn, be willing to have new experiences and get new perspectives.
And I think one of the best analogies I've heard for all lives matter, Black Lives Matter, that argument is that, and I'm sure probably plenty of people hearing this have heard it, but I'll say it again just in case to get it out there, is that if I have broken my foot and the doctor is tending to my broken foot, my mom's not going to say, I'm sorry, all her bones matter. That's not what we're worried. We're not worried about all my bones right now. We're worried about my broken foot. So, I think, and some people are going to fight against that analogy, but I think that's the best one I've heard up to this point, where if something's broken, you've got to tend to that.
Right. Well, and to frame it biblically, right? When Jesus, the good shepherd, now what does a shepherd do? A shepherd watches the sheep. When Jesus learns that one sheep is missing, Jesus doesn't say, well, all sheep matter. Jesus literally leaves 99 sheep unattended. He literally abandons his job to those 99 sheep for the sake of the one, because that one sheep in that moment matters.
Mm-hmm.
As Christian said earlier, he gave us the example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
and another. I'm sorry, Kristen. Another analogy that I heard that I thought it was funny but also true is the analogy when your wife says, "Do you love me?" And I said, "I love a lot of things." that's not the point. The point is she's asking, or she's looking for something. She has a need, so I need to be mindful and attend that need. I mean, same thing with my kids. Do you love me? Yeah, I love a lot of things. I also love my dog. So that's not the point. The point is to really put uh, what matters, and put a big light to focus on that problem. Is not negating, is not saying, yeah, but what about this? What about that? If you are questioning with something else, you're negating that need. If you're saying, yeah, but what about all the struggles with the poor white people, with the disadvantages that I have of being a divorced dad, or that's that's not what we're talking about. Let's go back to the to what we're talking about, and saying that if Black Lives Matter is what's prompting this conversation, is because of something. So we need to really tackle this and not negate the problem at hand.
when we were going through school, um, if we're in math class, we don't say to the math teacher, "Hey, history matters," or "All classes matter. Why are you just teaching us this?" One of the examples that I found online that just blew me away, but I actually thought back in a T-shirt made, but I don't want to get myself killed. When 9/11 comes around, say all buildings matter.
Oh,
Oh, ouch.
Yeah.
Ouch. Oh,
Yeah, see,
right.
yeah.
well,
That's how ridiculous the argument is. But it comes from a place of not wanting to engage in conversation. You want to throw out another superlative. You want to throw out another scenario that is loosely associated with what's happening, but you don't want to address the problem that we're referencing right now. That's
Because
it,
you want
to
to
me,
minimize it.
Right.
right, because
Right.
it doesn't affect you, but all this other stuff may or may not. But you don't want to take the rosy colored glasses off and actually deal with what's the realities that's in front of us. Yeah, when I see those kinds of those responses, those rebuttals, I was talking with a colleague on Saturday. I was like, look, hey, when you get those kind of questions, analyze or find out who you're dealing with, recognize who you're working with. If it's somebody that is not willing to be taught or willing to be in conversation with you, knock the dust off your shoes and keep moving, right? Say, okay, that's nice, keep on going. But if they're coming from a place of genuosity, or if you sense that there's some kind of genuosity that's behind their dysfunction, their dis-ease, right? There might be an opportunity to be able to talk with them through what they're feeling and what they've internalized to cause them to think a certain way. Case in point, when there was a young black girl that was at a pool party in McKinney a couple of years ago, 4 or 5 years
Oh,
ago.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I remember the
Yeah.
thing.
yeah.
She was brutalized by the police, right? Black pastor coalition, Black clergy fellowship from around the North Texas Conference and some other clergy decided to have a prayer vigil at the McKinney Police Department. Because I live up there, I was headed home anyway. I was going to go home early anyway, so I was one of the first people there. When I got to the police department, there was a black man and there was a black man and a white man holding an American flag and a Confederate flag, and it was funny because the black guy was holding the Confederate flag and the white guy was holding the American flag. When I got there, I had my clergy collar on and all that kind of stuff. It was just the weirdest thing. I had to pray before I got out of the car because I just didn't know where things were going to go, right? But I got out of the car and I felt a sense of peace over me. I thank God for the Holy Ghost. And I was like, and as I'm walking up, hey, are you here for that protest that y'all are going to have, that some pastors are going to have up here? I was like, well, yes, my name is Christian. I am a United Methodist minister, and we're going to have a prayer vigil here to pray over the situation that's gone sorely wrong. But let me ask you, why did you feel the need to come here with these flags? Oh, well, we're just coming here to make sure that everybody knows that Black Lives Matter, and this is my best friend, blah, blah, blah. The white guy's talking about his black friend. I'm like, okay. So long story short, we engaged in conversation. And by the end of our maybe 15, 20-minute conversation on why Black lives are mattering now and why this whole movement is happening and why that Confederate flag is a consolation, is a representation of treason and XYZ. Yeah, I went there. I went all the way in.
I expect
They
nothing.
rolled up, they rolled up their flags, put them in the truck, and they came back and stood with us. Now, I don't know where they are today, but hopefully they continue the work of unpacking what we talked about.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
transformation has to come through introspection as well as conversation, among
Yeah,
other
because
things.
a lot of the things is because of ignorance of the issue. And I'm saying ignorance not in a bad way, but I don't know. And if I'm willing to know more about this, then I can change my point of view. And that's what we want because we want to engage in conversations because the issue at hand might be completely foreign to somebody. For example, the issue with Black Lives Matter may be a concept foreign in the Hispanic community, or probably somebody that just crossed the border and is trying to be an active member of our society. And I had this kind of conversations and this type of conversations with this topic with people in Mexico, because they are also looking at the videos, they're looking at YouTube, they're looking at all the different news outlets and saying, yes, yes, Black Lives Matter. And I'm like, okay, but do you really know where this is coming from? Do you really know the genesis? No. Well, then let's go ahead and educate. Let's go ahead and have that conversation of why this is important, because it's not something against white folks. It's just an awareness that we need to put the spotlight on the Black community because they're suffering. That's the real issue. That's the real conversation that we need to have. The other day I was looking at monuments in Mexico being vandalized, putting uh, just bad words and saying that black folks matter, and that white supremacists. And I'm like, there's not white supremacists in Mexico. We need to have these conversations because there is a problem with racism in Mexico, but the genesis of it is on social matters, on social, on economic. That's the genesis of it. It's not. I mean, but we do have it. But this conversations are what we need, because we have allies, and if we want to have the correct ally, we need to educate people. We have been seeing demonstrations in Germany. We have been seeing demonstrations in Latin America, uh, in pro of the Black Lives Matter movement, and that's awesome. But we need to educate why it's so important, why we need to put the focus on the Black Lives Matter movement. And everything starts with accepting there is a problem, and in having um, what can I do attitude, rather than just, oh yeah, it doesn't concern me, so I'm not going to do anything about it, or yeah, I'm just going to march, but I don't really know what I'm marching for.
Well, friends, our time has come to an end again.
Man.
It all goes so quickly. Um,
I just want to quickly say, though, if I may, that, though, sometimes knowledge hurts.
oh,
Sometimes knowledge is painful.
indeed.
And I think a lot of times we have to learn to embrace that pain and get over it and be healing. That's it.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. Excellent point.
The other day I preached to the congregation a message, and I put the a phrase that it was crazy, but it was, I don't know, probably Holy Spirit inspired, that most of our blessings are wrapped in sandpaper. Because they hurt whenever you're opening the blessing. They're gonna hurt, and you're gonna heal, and you're gonna bleed. But at the end, uh, you're gonna benefit from that blessing because it's a gift from God. So,
wow.
Well, thank you all.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the discussion. We're sort of wide ranging, but all discussion matters.
That's right.
No, it struck me actually while Christian, while you and Betsy were talking, that I think one of the things that may be so disturbing about Black Lives Matter is that it unmasks white privilege. Because by naming certain lives that matter, it implies that they're outside the system. And what all lives matters does is actually
Reinforces
reinforces the system and hides the white privilege again.
Mm-hmm.
so that we can keep going. So that actually the two are very closely linked. I mean, it's, there's a lot of intersectionality, obviously. But
what a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive.
right.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you all for your time and for your vulnerability and your honesty and your passion, and your friendship.
Bless you.
No, thank
Oh.
you.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
Was great to be with all of you.
Yes, indeed. Peace.